Have everyone's attention, please. Welcome and thank you all for coming. It's a wonderful event for Brian Jack. We know we got to get out the vote. The whole county thanks you for coming, and I'd like to now introduce Mr. Philip Singleton.
You can tell he's been a commissioner for a long time. He had 5 minutes to talk, and he did it in like 30 seconds, so I was unprepared. It's great seeing you guys. I see most of these faces here, so for those who don't know me, my name is Philip. I served as a state house rep for a couple years in Fayette and Coweta. Honored to serve that. My time in the legislature has taught me a couple things. I see so many faces, it's hard not to stop, but being a man of character in politics is always a fight. It's a fight, and it's something that we need men of character to be in office, and that's something that I did when I launched the State Freedom Caucus Network as a state house rep. I fought for Save Girls Sports. I fought for the things that made our community great, and for those who don't know the whole story, that's why a Republican Speaker of the House drew me out of my district to punish me. And I tell this just to remind you that politics, when you do it right, always comes at a cost. It should never be the best thing you've ever done, and it should never be something that benefits you personally. It always comes at a cost. So I'm here because I know personally, I believe unequivocally that Brian Jack is going to be someone that fights for the people of Coweta County and Fayette County and the 3rd District. So for me, I'm no longer a state house rep. I'm currently a chief of staff up in Washington for another Georgia congressman. I know what the swamp is like every day. I drudge through it. That's where I wear my boots. They're covered in muck. It's a real thing. But America is not broken. Washington is broken. Okay, and what we cannot do is we cannot send someone to Washington to represent my home that cares more about their career or more about getting accolades or being a leadership position of this or leadership position of that than they do about taking care of the people that sent them there, okay? So in my view, for what it's worth to you guys, I have always told all of you the truth. That's the one thing I've always told you the truth, and I've stood firm no matter how many times I've gotten knocked down and punched in the teeth. I've always just told the truth and done what I think is right. There is no question in my mind in this election, there's only one choice. You need to go vote for Brian Jack and make sure he's the next congressman from the district. Can I get an amen? All right. So in political time, I think that was probably like 35 minutes. I don't know, time flies because Bob set the great example. But I actually have the distinct privilege and honor of introducing our next speaker. So I've known this man for a long time, since I moved back out of the Army in 2017. He's the first one I talked to when I said, hey, I'm thinking about getting into politics. He said, ho, let's hang up. You need to come talk to me in person so I can pray for you. And I drove down and met with him, and we had a great conversation. He's been a mentor and a friend since then. And I'm just really, it's a great honor to introduce my friend and former state senator, Mike Crane.
All right. Wow, what a great looking crew today. This is fantastic. I'm in a rather unique position today. For many of you, you know I've been in a few races in my day. And I have run 3 congressional races and a Senate race. And I ended up in runoffs, just to my luck, in every single one of them except this one. I came in 3rd place this time around. But what's unique about that, it put me in a different position than I've ever been in before. In the runoff, I'm sitting right where you sit, aren't I? I have to pick who's going to be my next congressman. And that's an important decision. How many of you are going to give that right up to somebody else? Anybody? Of course not. That's why you're here today. But do you know that it's likely, based on the stuff we've seen, 95% of the potential voters are going to sit this out? Isn't that hard to believe? That means your vote's worth 20. Your vote is worth 20, and you get to decide. And your sphere of influence becomes a remarkable, powerful tool in this race. So I know everybody I'm seeing in this room is actually going to vote if you live in the district, right? You do. What's interesting about it, many of you know, Tracy and I, my beautiful bride, there she is filming this, but always at my side in every campaign event, even the ones when we're helping somebody else, right? When we're helping somebody else, and this is a powerful tool. We've made Coweta County our home for 35 years, but it's getting a little crowded around here, so we moved to Heard County. And so we've made that our new home. What's interesting when I think about Heard County, and I think about one of the biggest crises we're facing right now as a country, the immigration invasion, you know that? That is a big deal. On average, during the Biden administration, the number of people that cross the border illegally by his permission supplants my entire county. There's 11,000 folks in Heard County. Every single day under the Biden administration, that many folks cross the border illegally and take our jobs. All the job growth that Biden has claimed underneath his current administration, all of the job growth goes to non-native born people. Did you know that? Every bit of that job growth. So one of our number one priorities for our next congressman is to make sure he's in a position to help our president shut down the border and start the biggest mass deportation in the history of the world. And what's remarkable about Brian, you know, a lot of folks like to get a call from President Trump. Right? How many of you get calls from him regularly? Bob Blackburn, where are you? Right? There you go. How many folks get to call the president back? Brian does. Brian gets to do that. And we're in a unique position in our district to have someone like Brian Jack, who goes into Congress on day one, not as a freshman congressman, with no connections and just looking up the food chain to see what happens. But he steps in there in the greatest position of influence, which is all we're doing here, right? The only reason I ran for Congress was because I wanted to be in a position of influence where I get to push the button for you. Now we've got an opportunity to send somebody who understands what is at stake, what is the country is facing right now. We're saying this is an existential threat, and that is not hyperbole, is it? We are facing that. And so we've got an opportunity to send somebody that actually day one is not just a freshman congressman. Somebody with relationships that are going to matter to the future of this nation. And I cannot more strongly recommend somebody other than myself to be your next representative for Congress. And since that's not an option, and don't you dare write in my name on that blank like you've been doing for the last 8 years. So, or I'm just talking about myself. And my wife. Brian Jack's the guy. Brian Jack, you can clap to that, amen? Brian Jack. And no other district in the country gets to make this claim either. It's unique to us. We're going to have the most effective, most connected congressman in the entire country when we elect Brian Jack. Now, he's not next. I don't get to introduce him, but I get to introduce somebody that has something he doesn't have, right? And I'm not talking, Brian is single. How many of y'all know that, for the single ladies in the room? Brian is single. He's hoping to do as well as I did in the lottery of life when I got my bride 41 years ago. But Brian, this next guest that's going to talk about Brian Jack is a congressman from Utah who has something on his hand that some of us might like. A Super Bowl champion and congressman from Utah, Congressman Burgess Owens. Please come down here and inspire these folks.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, guys. Wow. Let me just start off by saying this. Thank you. I tell you guys, we have a legacy, we have a culture that we're now passing down. It's because of you that get it, that we'll have an opportunity to do that. So I want to thank you guys for that. One of the things that we do as Americans, we live in this freedom bubble. It's natural. It's what we build our lives for. It's spending time with our kids, it's building memories, it's building businesses, it's traveling, it's getting ready for retirement, all those things we do. In the process of living in this little freedom bubble, sometimes we forget that there's evil on the doorsteps, evil outside the door, that bubble. We had no idea that outside that bubble were pure Marxists trying to destroy our culture of faith, family, free market education. I tell you what I've now noticed, what I've seen as I look back, there were Americans that even though we were living in our freedom bubble, were outside fighting that evil. The Trump team, of which Brian Jack is part of that process. It allowed us to have the 106th, 17th Congress, which I was part of, the most pro-America First Congress in our country for a long time. I'm going to bring up Mike Collins in a few minutes. He was part of 118th, another pro-American. That all came from one simple thing. Trump pulled back the curtains for us. We realized that we are truly at war. We're trying to hold on to a culture, a way of life that we've just taken for granted, that we now know we have to fight for. So I want to thank you guys, because this is really what America's all about. We love to just enjoy freedom, enjoy our lives, but when we know that we're in attack, we the people, I'm going to use an old Raiders theme that you guys, I know this is Atlanta, but still it counts for America. We just win, baby. And that's what I'm excited about. What I love about what we have right now is an opportunity, and Mike just mentioned it. We have an opportunity. We build our majority. We get the Senate. We get President Trump back. We have the opportunity to have the one person who's been a friend to all three of those areas. The one person can go into every single room and have this conversation about what it takes to pull us together, to put the strategies we need to put in place to win our country back. And I tell you guys, for you to be here in Georgia, to represent and send to DC that one person, you're truly blessed. Just know that. We're waiting for guys like Brian for quite a while. And now that he's going to be joining us, it's going to be a pretty exciting process. So let me just say this. I'm going to give you guys a real quick Raider story, if you don't mind. So, can I do that? I see there's a few young people in here that might not know that the Raiders used to win football games a long time ago. There was a time. Here's the thing that Al Davis did with the culture. It was a culture of second chances. It was a culture of America first. It was a culture of anything it took to just win. And that's what America's all about. I want to give you guys a real quick, some nicknames to get an idea of the culture that we used to have in those days. Some guys might remember these names. The Snake, the Ghost, the Assassin, Dr. Death, Mad Dog, Killer, Kick 'em in the head. But guess what? It was a culture that once you stepped on that field, you wanted to step up and do your job. The year we went to the Super Bowl is one thing, and this is what's happening I see right now, and I see this across our country, guys. That was a year that no matter what position you played, you stepped on that field, your goal was very simply this, to give everything you had, and when you walked off the field, that you were not the weak link. Now, we've had people on the sideline, we've had people in the stands. I think for the first time in America that I've been around, to see this engagement we have, the enthusiasm, the desire to get back what we know we deserve. We have people coming with all different types of talents. They're putting their foot on the field, and when they leave that field, not only will they be exhausted, but victorious. That's what we need to be looking at November 5th. And Brian is the one. He could talk about the border. He could talk about crime. He could talk about these termites, the bureaucrats within our system who are stealing, attacking our Constitution. He's given us everything we need, Georgia. Let's make sure he gets to Congress. We're one of our teammates. And along with President Trump, a bigger majority in the Senate, we will just win, baby, okay? I look forward to that. Let me just say this about Mike, because Mike and I, on the same T&I committee together, he is old school. Remember old school, roll up your sleeves, blue collar, get the work done. Doesn't matter how long it takes, your commitment is there, your good name is there. I have so much respect for this guy. And again, he's a shade of Trump, because 1/17 was my Congress, 1/18 was Mike's, the most pro-American, innovative legislators I've seen. So I cannot say how proud I am to serve with Mike. I'm glad to be here together with Mike to highlight and focus on Brian. But you guys are doing good. Just keep it up, Georgia. We love what you're doing. Love what you're sending to D.C., okay? You keep it going. Mike Collins.
Man, Burgess, I wasn't expecting that. All that for $20. Hey, listen, one quick thing. I know that's the line, and I am very bad at standing still, so if I go past it, then we'll find out what happens if I blow up. You know, I am Mike Collins. It's good to be back in the 3rd District. You know, I think the last time I actually spoke in the 3rd District was probably 20 years ago, in 2004. Burgess is right. I'm a freshman in Congress. I like to tell folks I am a 2nd-generation trucker. That's what I've done for 30 years. Yes, sir. And I'm also 2nd generation in Congress. Many of you may or may not know my dad, Matt Collins. He actually held down the 3rd District for 12 years. And so it's a lot like coming home. I've roamed the woods. I know Coweta was brought in at the end of his career, but it's a lot like coming home to be over here and to campaign for such a good young man. You know, I tell people several things. Number one, I was in the private sector on the other side of the ledger when Trump was in the White House the first time around. And I know what it felt like to do the number one thing that you never get tired of doing, winning. I mean, we were all doing well. Those Trump policies were lifting all boats. Those Trump tax policies that have expired were helping out everybody. And we need that back. We need our America First agenda back, those policies back in place. Right now, in the U.S. House of Representatives, the Republican conference is made up of around 60+%, somewhere in that neighborhood, of America First agenda representatives. That means that we were elected from 2016 up until the last cycle. What we need to do now is pad that majority with America First representatives. Amen. Because we had him the first time around, but they didn't have his back. But by God, I can tell you one thing. We get Trump back in the White House, we take the House back, or keep the House and grow the majority, and we can't take the Senate back. We're going to get his policies passed into law so that he doesn't have to do executive action over again just to have it nullified if somebody else comes in there behind him. Now, I didn't have a primary opposition, and we're going across the country, y'all. We've picked out 5 or 6 candidates that we're helping all across this country that we feel like are good, solid, America First, conservative to the core, people that want to work. And I'm here to tell you, I've known Brian for quite a number of years. I've seen him work. I've seen how hard he's working just in this campaign. And I've seen all kinds of candidates. And I want somebody to run as hard as I do. And by God, we got a young man right there. He's ready to go, and he's ready to fight. Listen, I know you didn't come here to hear me, but I encourage you, please get out there, vote. Early voting already started? Early voting has started. Please, go ahead and vote. I know Republicans, I was just as bad. My dad always wanted me to go last to count how many people had voted. Get out there and vote early and encourage other people to go vote. Don't wait till Tuesday because something may come up. But listen, we've got Brian on deck. Brian, I know these folks want to hear from you. This is your next congressman in the Georgia's 3rd District, Brian Jack.
Well, thank you very much, Congressman Collins. And like the congressman, it's a rite of passage in Georgia to go through a runoff election. So like you did last cycle, I'm trying to do everything I can over the next 8 days to remind folks that we have a runoff election for our congressional district. Early voting starts today. It closes on Friday, and election day is, of course, on June 18th. And before I begin, I would like to take a special moment to acknowledge and encourage everyone to applaud the two candidates that I faced in the first round who had no reason to endorse me other than the fact that we got to know each other, and I think that shows the decorum and the respect we had behind the scenes for each other. So I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge Philip Singleton and Mike Crane. Thank you. So for many of you, I've had a chance to engage, interact, and speak with you throughout this campaign. But for those who are just seeing me for the first time, I'd love to walk you through a little bit of my background, my bio, and how I came before you today. I am from Peachtree City, Georgia, and I went to Woodward Academy. I played basketball and baseball there. And like Congressman Owens, who was not just an incredible college athlete, also had a Super Bowl ring on his finger from the Oakland Raiders, I will say I really wanted growing up to be a college athlete. It did not happen because every year God sent me a reminder that that just was not going to be the life for me. I had a knee surgery my sophomore year, a knee surgery my junior year, and a knee surgery my senior year. And each time I ended up at Piedmont Fayette Hospital, and surely I got that message. I was privileged and blessed to go to a Christian school, Pepperdine University. For those of you all that know Ken Starr or remember him from the 90s, he was the dean at Pepperdine at the time. And I mentioned Ken Starr because he is somebody who tried to hold the Clinton administration accountable. And one of the themes you'll see throughout my campaign is accountability. I strongly believe in it. I think we need more accountability, and especially when we see the overzealous, overburdensome Biden administration, everything they've done, we need more accountability in our life going forward. So I had a privilege to go there, and while at Pepperdine, I also felt called to serve. I was very passionate about that. So every summer, I came home and I worked in my city hall. I worked at Peachtree City Hall my first, second, third year, and I started off in the Planning Commission. And I can tell you, having had the honor of being in the White House of President Trump, I thought politics at the most raw, angriest form would be in Congress. It's not. It's at a Planning Commission meeting. When you're trying to zone, and for the developers in the room, when you're trying to zone something from single to multifamily residential, I see just how passionate it is. But I say that because I do think, it informed and shaped my worldview. Because if you're at that most local level, like Commissioner Blackburn, we're in his district here, you have to hold yourselves accountable to the people. Because when you go down to the grocery store, when you go to La Paria, when you go to any restaurant around the area, you're going to see your constituents, they're going to interact with you. And I recognize, and I want to talk about this over the course of my remarks, that you, more often than not, you feel like you vote for somebody and then they go up and you can't hold them accountable anymore. You don't get a chance to interact with them anymore. You only get to see us on the campaign trail. Well, for me, starting off at Peachtree City Hall, ending up by President Trump's side in the Oval Office, I think was a fantastic start to show that accountability must be had at every layer of government. When I left college, I went to work for a group for 4 years whose principal focus and mission was to strengthen the U.S.-Israel relationship, which today is under siege. Very passionate about that, aligns with my faith, and I suspect everyone in the room too. What we saw happen last October and what we've seen over the past 8 months or however many months since then, is the Biden administration trying to drag our country so far left and trying to drive a wedge between our strongest ally and the Middle East. And a lot of people, they ask me, they say, Brian, you worked in the White House. What's really going on in the White House today? And I say it over and over again. When I was privileged to serve by President Trump's side in the White House, he was in the Oval Office at least 12 hours a day, if not longer. Today, Joe Biden's in the Oval Office maybe 1 hour a day. So for the other 23 hours of the day, his staff, his unelected staff, are leading the country so far leftward we can't even recognize the America we all grew up in. And that is a concern and a challenge, but they do so because they don't fear that accountability. And again, that's going to be a theme you hear from me throughout today. After I left that group, I had a chance to work for an incredible man of faith, character, and conviction, someone who will be coming to our district on Thursday to campaign for me. I worked for Dr. Ben Carson for a year, who is an incredible, incredible man. He's on the short list for vice president, so we'll see what happens over the next 6 weeks, but ultimately was a wonderful person for whom to work, and I have the privilege today of serving on the board of directors of his think tank. It's called the American Cornerstone Institute. If you want to look it up, we do some incredible work. We've got a lot of patriotic education, something we all feel is obviously absent in a lot of our children's and grandchildren's lives, but we've got this thing called Little Patriots. It's a cartoon that teaches the kids that you can be proud to be American and be proud of our forefathers. But in 2016, like many of you, I was inspired by President Trump's campaign to make our country great again. And 8 years and 2 months ago, I got the phone call. I was enjoying a meal at Ashley Park. I was at La Paria, I mentioned it before, and I got the phone call from the Trump campaign saying, Brian, we're about to announce that you're joining the Trump campaign. Congratulations. And that phone call changed the rest of my life. It's one of the reasons why I stand before you today. I had the privilege throughout the first 4 or 5 months of that campaign, crisscrossing our state, crisscrossing our district, going from county convention to county convention and district convention to state convention, trying to do everything I could to build the Trump campaign out. And I had the privilege of being by President Trump's side in November 2016. We all remember that infamous phone call that Hillary Clinton made, conceding, special moment, and obviously all of our lives to see across the screen Donald Trump elected the 45th president. I was by his side when he got that phone call, unbelievably gracious in it. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I recognized and realized that we had a chance for once to elect somebody that we believed in that would actually do what he said he was going to do. So from the first to last day of the Trump administration, I worked in the president's White House. I served as his White House political director, and my job was to take his agenda, take his policies, and move them through Congress. And the results speak for themselves. We had the most secure border in the history of our country. We had the largest tax cut in the history of our country in 2017. And we had incredible conservative judges and justices up and down the federal bench. We have a very clear contrast going forward this November because we've now seen what 3.5 years of Joe Biden has done. And if you think back to 2020, we all joked around about Biden's basement. But what was so scary about that campaign is they never brought Joe Biden out to talk about what he would do because they know if they did, they would never have a chance to do what they did. So we have this November a chance to see a very clear contrast between two ways of living. We're going to see that play out later this month in our state. Joe Biden's going to face President Trump in a debate here in Atlanta later this month. We're going to see these policies play out in real time. But when it comes to this congressional race, I guess the question becomes, what can we expect from our next congressman? Because as Mike mentioned earlier before, we don't often have these opportunities to send somebody to Washington, D.C., and when you do, and I recognize and I feel every person in the room, I see it across our district as we're campaigning, you listen to us, you listen to our speeches, you listen to our remarks, and you want to believe that we're going to do what we say we're going to do. But more often than not, I recognize you feel like you're going to get let down. So what I will say is this. My record stands with President Trump. What you saw during his 4 years in the White House is going to be my record going forward. That's what I care about. That's what I'm passionate about. And if I could share some ideas with you that I think we should demand from our next congressman and what I would be proud to do, I think first and foremost, we've got to start with the southern border. We all know that every district, every county, every city, every town in our congressional district is now a border city, a border town, a border county. And I think that one of the things we find over and over is the problem that's happening at the southern border. You have to ask yourself, why is it happening? For me, it's happening because Joe Biden views the 17 million illegal immigrants in our country as 17 million Democrat votes in his column going forward. And we see this across the country in some of the swing states. We're talking earlier about what states are going to decide this presidential election. Georgia, of course, we've got to do everything we can to get our 16 electoral votes in President Trump's column. But when you go to the Midwest, some of these swing states, if you're an illegal immigrant, you're going into a social services center, you're being handed a voter registration card. We should expect from our next congressman, and I would proudly support any legislation that mandates that only American citizens can vote in American elections. I think we've also got to look, and this is something that I find incredibly interesting to see how our country is starting to wake up and see what's wrong and everything that's gone on in the last 3.5 years. If you look at what happened about a year ago, President Trump on the campaign trail, I remember we were campaigning in Iowa, I think, and he launched and rolled out what he said when he's elected, he wants to enact the largest domestic deportation operation in America's history. And at the time, there were a lot of folks that were very, the left and people on the left were losing their minds. Would it not surprise you that a month ago, Americans were polled that very question? 42% of Democrats now support President Trump's plan to enact the largest domestic deportation operation. 90% of Republicans do. And you got to have a congressman that's going to stand strong and fight for you, and that's something I know every single person in our district, we know we cannot function as a country if we've got 20, 30, 40 million illegal immigrants. That's exactly what you're going to get if you get another 4 years of Joe Biden and a Democrat House to go along with it. The second thing we talk a lot about, and every single one of us is going to experience as we go on our vacations and get to spend time with our family, do cookouts over the summer. For 3 years, we've had crushing inflation affect our daily lives. So I often talk about a three-pronged approach, three things that I personally believe we can do to reverse the course of inflation that we've had upon us. And the first thing we should do is unleash America's energy potential. And God has blessed us with abundant resources, right? We've got coal up and down the Appalachian Mountains. We've got shale in North Dakota. We've got Alaska. We've got incredible, incredible things. But what you find more often than not is that the radical left wants to declare war on American energy production. They want to make us dependent on foreign energy reserves. But every single thing that we have, everything you're wearing, all the lights we have, all the Coke you drink later this afternoon, right? Every single thing has an energy cost associated with it. If we drive down energy costs, and for all the builders out there too, you know it as well, supplies, materials, everything has an energy cost associated with it. We unleash America's energy potential, we can help reverse the flow of inflation. The second thing we can do is the least sexy thing to talk about, but one of the most important, and that's deregulation. So deregulation, how do we talk about that? In 2016, when President Trump was campaigning for president, he had a very novel idea. He said, for every regulation on the books, we're going to repeal 2 existing ones. I was proud to work by his side, and what was our record after the end of his administration? 8 regulations were repealed for every regulation put on the books. If we deregulate, if we use Congress and the authority it has and the power of the purse to push and push and push to deregulate, you're going to find businesses thrive, hire more people, revitalize our communities, and do everything we possibly can to deregulate. Thank you. That balanced budget amendment, more often than I think 49 of 50 states have some semblance of a balanced budget amendment. We should do everything we can. It could be a great way for us as a country to come together, unify, pass an amendment to our Constitution in the next 4 years, something I'd be very privileged and proud to do. The next thing I'd like to talk about, which I know affects each and every one of us, when we turn on the television, we get angry. We saw what happened 11 days ago in a courtroom in Manhattan. And as somebody who myself has also felt the target, if you will, of some of the same people that come after President Trump, I can tell you that this two-tiered system of justice in our country is a disgrace. Later on, I'm going to have a chance to introduce somebody who's doing everything he can to fight back against it. But I'd just like to talk about what concerns me the most about that. All of these cases that you see, these cases brought against President Trump, they all come from Democrat strongholds. Manhattan, 88% Democrat territory. Fulton County, we talk about Fulton County a lot. How many people remember back in the old days, you go to Christmas at Lenox Mall, you loved going in there and shopping. Nobody feels safe going to Fulton County anymore, but at the same time, they're using taxpayer dollars to go after President Trump. Some of those dollars also come through our federal government appropriations process. We're funding, in large part, some stuff in Manhattan and Fulton. We should do everything we can to attach strings to that. But I say that because we find more often than not that these constituencies that are bringing these charges against President Trump and his allies come from Democrat strongholds. And you've got Democrat jury pools. It's all loaded with Democrats. And how on earth are you going to get a fair trial in those environments? We should challenge our next Congress. I can tell you Jim Jordan can talk about what he's doing now, but our next Congress should do everything we can to ensure that accountability remains for those who have purveyed this two-tiered system of justice upon us. Congress has the unique authority through the power of the purse and the appropriations process and the power of the subpoena to uncover all the wrongdoing that we see throughout our country. We should use both of those tools to fight back and push back against what's happening, not just to President Trump, but all of his allies across the country. It's a shame. It's a disgrace. Well, I will tell you this. I think more often than not, you find that the radical left feels like we're never going to punch back. They feel like we're never going to stand strong, and they feel like we're never going to push back. I think we should demand from our next Congress, using that two-tiered approach, you should use the power of the purse, the power of the subpoena to push back, to fight back, and I'm encouraged by what I think we're going to find later next week. I'll let Jim Jordan talk about it, or maybe later this week. We're going to see a lot of accountability coming forward. But ultimately, thank you very much. I'd like to talk about one more issue, and then we'll get to the speaker I know we're all looking forward to listening to. But one more issue that is a niche issue, but something I care a lot about is what we're going to find this next Congress. Artificial intelligence is something it creeps into our lives every single day, and I think it is an issue that this next Congress is going to have to grapple with. And I say that because it's already here, to your point, it is. The challenge that I find, there's great potential, but there's also great concern. And I care a lot. We've got to protect our seniors, because I will tell you one thing that I get concerned about, and I know there's some anecdotes in the room, some folks from Newnan were sharing this earlier, you're going to start getting phone calls, and it's going to be the voice of somebody, one of your loved ones, that's imitating their voice. There's a real concern going forward. We already saw that happen earlier in the campaign cycle when people are imitating voices of another. AI also has that unique ability to affect the way our children think about issues. If you've got a child or a grandchild in school today, more often than not, if you ask them to write a history of Newnan, Georgia, or Coweta County, you're going to find that AI is going to inform and influence the way they think about things. It's the same thing with big tech. When you look at, if you want to learn about my campaign, you're probably going to Google Brian Jack for Congress, and whatever comes up on that first page is going to influence the way you think about things. And I find it very distressing and concerning that our next generation, the generations to come, may rely on a machine to tell them how to think about things. So I say that because I do think that's a niche issue that our next Congress is going to have to deal with. And I can tell you, as somebody who certainly sees that coming from a long way away, it's something that I hope we can make sure that we can harness the potential of AI, but at the same time protect our vulnerable populations and ensure that the generations coming up have that ability to go into the library, learn about subjects just like each and every one of us did, and not rely on a machine to tell them how to think. Thank you. So I'd just like to close by, first off, thank you for coming out today on the first day of early voting. And you're going to hear from me over and over and over stressing early voting starts today, it ends on the 14th, this Friday, and Election Day is June 18th. And I recognize some folks may be traveling. If you've gotten an absentee ballot, do your best to get it back in. I will say I know every single person in this room has had a problem with the Palmetto mail facility, and every single person in this room may be getting Christmas cards in July. But I say that because, we've got to do everything we can to make sure your vote counts in this race, because this is a challenge to us, right? I'm a proud member of the Sons of the American Revolution, very proud of my forefathers that fought for this country. I know many people in this room probably belong to similar organizations, and I say that because they fought for the ability for us to be here on a Monday afternoon talking about issues. And they did that because they also expected we would go out and vote. And my concern is this most recent primary we had 11% turnout in our district. So I say that in this room, we got about maybe 100, 150 people here. That means that only 11 of us would have voted. And if you think about this next election, analysts predict and project that we'll only have 5% turnout, which means only 5 out of 100 people will vote. I'm going to do everything I can to remind people of Election Day. And I think we owe it to ourselves. But I also say, as I said before, again, I recognize the challenge and the decision you face, because when you see these elections come about, you get excited, you hear us come before you, we're very, very accessible during campaigns. I recognize then that you feel right thereafter, the second they win, that they go off and they do whatever they want to do and they're never held accountable again. I want to connect this back to where I started, because I started working at Peachtree City Hall, and I recognize and realize that's where accountability matters, and that's the exact same person, exact same type of approach you're going to find from me if elected to Congress. And if I can add to that, I just want to note, when you look at how can you judge success, I can tell you the way I judge success is I want to be able, if elected your congressman, to come back into this room a year from today, maybe even earlier, whatever the case may be, because I know if I'm applauded in this room, I know I will have done my job right. If I'm applauded in a room outside of this district, I will not have done my job right. So I want to be applauded by the people in this room, because ultimately I want to be your voice, because that's what a congressman is. It's your voice to the federal government. It's your voice to the stuff that's going on today. And I say it over and over again. I recognize the challenge and decision you face. I would ask you to judge us, judge me, judge my candidacy by how I've conducted myself throughout this campaign. That's exactly what you're going to get from me going forward. So I'd like to take a moment now to introduce our next speaker, somebody I know we're all very excited to hear and see. When people ask me, who do you want to be like when you're in Congress? There's a great lot of people, but I can tell you before you today, I certainly would be honored if, again, I come back here and just after the new year, if I'm sworn in as your congressman, I would love for you guys to say, you're just like our next speaker, Jim Jordan. Thank you.
Thank you. Go on, sit down. Thank you. Don't clap. I haven't said anything yet, for goodness sake. It is good to be with you. The State of the Union is like the closest thing to pageantry we have in the country. We're not like Great Britain. We don't have the king, the queen, the monarch, and all that stuff. But we have the State of the Union. It's a neat thing. I've been to 17 of them. Mike and Burgess have been to several. Brian's been there some with President Trump. Next year he'll be there as a member of Congress, listening to President Trump. But it's a big production. It's a good thing. You got the House, you got the Senate, you got the Supreme Court down front, you got all the lights, the camera, you got the dignitaries, the diplomats, the press, and it's a big thing. And they announced the president. It's a big thing. And so, like I said, I go to every one. If you remember the one a year and a half ago, President Biden gives his speech, and it was a typical Joe Biden speech. It was pretty bad, right? Not as bad as this one. This past year, by the way, the State of the Union gave this year. First thing he talks about is Ukraine. It's our State of the Union. First thing he talks about is a foreign country, which is crazy enough. And then later in the speech, he said one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. About 2/3 of the way through the speech, he says, we're going to put a temporary port in Gaza to give supplies to the people in Gaza. And I'm sitting beside a colleague of mine, a West Point grad, and I kind of elbowed my buddy, and I said, Warren, isn't it kind of warfare 101? If you want one side to win, you shouldn't give supplies to the other. I mean, think about how stupid that is. And of course, you saw the pier kind of fell into the Mediterranean, and they got to spend another $200 million a year to put it back. I mean, this is crazy. I want Israel to win. I don't know about you guys, but I want them to win. But a year and a half ago, the one before that one, Joe Biden gave his speech, and like I said, it was pretty bad. And then the response was given by Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders. And I thought she knocked it out of the park. And I tell people that is not easy to do because, like I said, the president's in the chamber with all the lights, the camera, the crowd. When you're given the response, you're in a room talking to a camera. And she was tremendous. But her best line, in my judgment, her best line in that speech was when she said, the divide in America today is normal versus crazy. And that is so true. And that is what this election is about. It is about stopping the craziness. I mean, think about it. Think about all the crazy things that the left. Not all Democrats are crazy, but the left that now controls that party is in fact crazy, right? So it is crazy to defund the police. That's just stupid. It is crazy not to have a border. It is crazy to think, as Brian talked about, it is crazy to think non-citizens should be able to vote in American elections. It is crazy to think boys should compete against girls in sports. I'm just a country boy from Western Ohio, but I kind of think boys should compete against boys, girls should be. That's just sort of how we've always done it. You know, the left always says, oh, you Republicans are engaged in the culture wars. No, we're not. We're just for normal, right? We're just for normal. Here's one. Think about this one. It is crazy to let a Chinese spy balloon, and the key words in that phrase are Chinese and spy, right? It is crazy to let a Chinese spy balloon fly clear across the country and then shoot it down. Like, my guess is good folks in Georgia would say, I'd have probably shot it down before it went across the country, right? I know Brian would have, right? I know Trump would have, right? I mean, this is what we're up against today. So I mostly just came to say thank you. I learned a long time ago, good things in life don't just happen. If you want to accomplish anything that matters, anything of meaning, significance, lasting value, it takes time, it takes work, it takes effort, it takes sacrifice. Most importantly, it takes a willingness to assume the risk associated with trying to do something worthwhile. Because when you commit to a worthy objective and goal, there's always the risk you might fail. And you get involved in politics today, There's the definite risk you're going to get attacked. Not just guys on the ballot, but people who get involved. We had folks do a fundraiser for us conservatives 2 years ago out in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. They own the ski lift out there, did a nice fundraiser for us. Patagonia said, we're no longer going to supply your store because you're helping those conservative Republicans, that Jordan guy, right? This is what, you all know it, but you're willing to get involved because it's worth it. The values that make our country the greatest nation ever are worth fighting for. So thank you for taking the risk and getting in the game. It's so darn important. Second, thank you for helping a good guy, Brian Jack, go to the United States Congress. There are people in politics who you wish weren't, right? We call them Democrats, right? But then there are people like Brian, who you are glad is getting in public service, who's been in public service, served the president, has the right values, the right attitude, the right work ethic. Frankly, he's smart. Never hurts to have smart people in charge, right? And most importantly, and I tell this to people all the time, we make this job way too complicated. Being a member, we make it way too complicated. It's pretty darn easy. What'd you tell the voters you were going to do when you ran for the job? If they elect you, go do what you said. Brian Jack will do that. He will go. You know, the founders, when they set this amazing place up, this experiment in liberty we call America, when they set it up, they wanted the House to be the body closest to the people. And that's why every 2 years you get a chance to throw us out. And that's a good thing. Keeps you honest. Keeps you come back talking to the folks you get the privilege of representing. And understand, in the history of our great country, only about 12,000 individuals had the chance to serve in the United States Congress. Only 12, through all the 200 plus years. Brian Jack's the kind of guy you want representing you, your family, your community, your business. He's the right guy. So again, thank you for helping him. Finally, thank you for helping President Trump. He is a good man. A good man with an amazing attitude. You know what I probably like about the president the most? Is he hates to lose. Have you noticed that, right? And I tell people that's a great American quality. Americans aren't a bunch of wimpy, sissy losers. Americans are winners. I think some people say it's in our DNA. You know, the folks who started this place, they came here because in Europe they said, oh, you got to practice your faith a certain way. And they said, no, we don't. We're willing to get on the ship, risk it all, and go to this place called America where we have the freedom to practice our faith the way we think the good Lord wants us to and also chase down our goals and dreams. That's just an American attitude. President Trump has that off the charts. And that is so good. I mean, what he's went through. I mean, think about these three cases. You talk about political. I mean, Alvin Bragg said he could not envision, first he campaigns on going after President Trump, then he gets in office, sees how ridiculous his case is, and he actually says, I cannot envision a world where I would prosecute President Trump and call Michael Cohen as a witness. And then he does just that after President Trump announced he was running for president. Fonnie Willis starts her investigation here in your state back in February 21, but she doesn't bring an indictment against President Trump and 19 other people until after he announces he's running for office, running for president again. And of course, Merrick Garland doesn't appoint Jack Smith until 3 days after President Trump announces he's running for president. Total political. And they've been out to get this guy because they know he's fighting for us, for we the people. 2016, they spied on his campaign. Then it was Mueller, $30 million, 19 lawyers, 41 FBI going after President Trump to find nothing, no collusion, none whatsoever. Then it was impeachment. Then they raid his home. Then it's the 14th Amendment. Then it's Jack Smith. And then it's the Alvin Bragg. I mean, on and on it goes. The thing I keep asking is, what are they going to try next? We're less than 5 months till election day. What are they going to try? There's going to be something. So I just love his attitude. If you remember what happened a week ago when they got this crazy verdict in New York, it reminded me of a year and a half ago when we were all watching, actually a little more than a year and a half ago, August, a year and a half ago, a little more than a year and a half ago, when we were watching them raid his home. I don't know if you were, but Polly and I, we're at home, and we're just standing out on our deck, looking at the TV, and we're like, we couldn't, like most Americans, can't believe this is happening in the greatest country ever. And they're going through his house, and they got the windbreakers with FBI on the back, and you're like, this is crazy. So I told Polly, I said, I'm just going to call him. I'm just going to call him up. So I call him, and he answers, and he doesn't even say hello. He just goes, Jim, this is the best thing that's ever happened to our party. He goes, my numbers are going to go up. And I'm Amazing attitude. Very few human beings could withstand what he's had to endure and have that kind of positive attitude. And he does it. He has a great line. When you've all been, I'm sure, to rallies and things. Brian and I have been to several of them as Mike and Burgess. But he has a great line. He says, they're coming after me because I'm fighting for you. We were in Iowa with him during the caucuses, like 21 below zero. So it was stinking cold. And we're at this rally. Thank goodness it was indoors. We're at this rally, and he changed it. He says, they're coming after my freedom because I'm fighting for yours. And I told him after, I said, I like it when you say it that way even better, because that's what's at stake here. It's really we can recover from all the stupid things they're doing. When you think about in 3 years and like 100 and some odd days of Joe Biden being president, we've went from a secure border to no border, safe streets to record crime, $2 gas to $4 gas, and went from stable prices to record inflation. We went from a president and President Trump who projected strength as the leader and as the commander-in-chief to Joe Biden, right? But what scares me more than anything is how they have weaponized these agencies against we the people, the very people they're supposed to serve. And what scares me the most is what they're trying to do to the First Amendment. You think about every single liberty we enjoy as Americans under the First Amendment has been assaulted by the Biden administration. Every single one. You have 5 rights under the First Amendment. Your right to practice your faith, your right to assemble like we're doing right now, your right to petition the government, free press, free speech. They've attacked all 5. They told Americans during COVID, you couldn't go to church on Sunday. In America? That's the very first thing mentioned in the First Amendment. Your right to assemble. I tell this story. 2 years ago, I spoke to the New Mexico Republican Party in Amarillo, Texas. Because they had to go to Texas to get the freedom to assemble because their crazy Democrat governor wouldn't let them do it in their own state where they pay taxes. You want to petition your member of Congress to redress your grievances? You want to talk to your member of Congress? Up until we took over the House a year and a half ago, up until then, you had to do it at home because Nancy Pelosi wouldn't let you in your own capital that you pay for, your capital. Free press, Jen Psaki, this is probably almost 2 years ago. Jen Psaki's given the press briefing from the press room in the White House. Now think about it. The White House is considered the center of freedom on the planet. The president's the most important official on the planet, and his press spokesperson in the press room in the White House talking to the press says these 2 sentences. Most Americans now get their news from social media platforms. We, the Biden administration, are working with those platforms to limit the information you see. And I'm literally sitting in our office. We had some staff in there, and we just happened to have the briefing on. And she said, then I looked at our staff, I'm like, did the press woman just say in the press room that she's for limiting the press? This is crazy. But the most important right we have, more important than anything else, is our right to talk, our right to speak. Because if you can't speak, you can't practice your faith, you can't share your faith, you can't petition your government, you don't have a free press. And that's the one they're coming after, censoring your speech, limiting what you can say, what you can post, what you can tweet, what you can see, what you can read. That is frightening. That is what is truly at stake in this election, and it's why we got to make sure President Trump wins. And it's why we got to have people like Brian Jack in the United States Congress. I'll just finish one last thing. And again, thank you all for what you do, for, like I say, for taking the risk, for getting in the game. What would Teddy Roosevelt said? It's in the arena where it all happens. A lot of folks can hang out on the sideline, lob the cheap shots, and call you names and all that. But you get in the game to help a good guy win, to help President Trump win. You're going to take some hits, but thank you for doing that. Our charge is real simple. I don't think it's actually a scripture verse in my judgment. My favorite scripture verse. 2 Timothy 4:7. Paul's the old guy giving advice to the young guy, Timothy. And he says what? Fight the good fight, finish the course, keep the faith. And I tell folks, I love that verse because of the action in it. It's not a wimpy, sissy verse. Americans aren't timid people. Americans are Americans. Americans know it's about fighting, it's about finishing, it's about keeping faith with the principles that made us the best country ever. And understand this. Polly and I have traveled to Israel 5 times. When you go over there, doesn't matter who you talk to, people in the government, people in the IDF, business people, doesn't matter who you talk to, they all say this. They said the best way your country can help our country, the best way America can help Israel is for America to stay strong. When you're strong, we're better. And the truth is this, when America leads, the whole world's better. The whole world's better. And right now it's not happening. That's what's at stake, and it's really an attitude that's always been there until, I think, frankly, this administration. Certainly an attitude President Trump embodies that scripture verse. Fight, finish, keep. That is our charge. If we do that, we're going to have President Trump in the White House. You're going to be represented by a great man in the United States Congress. We're going to keep the House. We're going to keep the Senate. And we're going to get this country back on track, which is good for everybody on this planet. God bless you all.